Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Is Allie dead? The mere thought made the air thick with tension as Jack Abbott's eyes blazed with a mixture of fury, desperation, and an almost feral need for the truth. He wasn't asking politely. He wasn't even asking at all. He was demanding, gripping Noah's shoulders with a force that rattled bones and shook the very ground beneath them, a physical manifestation of the turmoil churning inside him. "Tell me the truth," Jack growled, his voice sharp enough to cut through the silence of the dimly lit room, reverberating against walls that had silently borne witness to countless secrets, betrayals, and the kind of heartbreak that left permanent scars. Noah, caught in the vice of Jack's intensity, gasped, the pressure on his chest making it difficult to breathe, his mind spinning in a whirlwind of guilt, fear, and hopelessness, knowing that every word, every hesitation, could tip the fragile balance between revelation and ruin. His hands shook as he tried to form the words, his throat dry, his eyes wide and haunted, because deep down, he knew the truth he carried could destroy not only Allie's life, but everyone who had ever dared to hope in the fragile safety of Genoa City's twisted web of lies. "Jack, I can't," he began, voice trembling, but Jack's grip tightened, eyes narrowing to dangerous slits, a storm of anger and sorrow merging into one uncontrollable force, and Noah could feel the weight of the Abbott legacy pressing down on him, the demands of loyalty and morality clashing violently in his chest. Memories of Allie's laughter, her bright smile, the moments of innocence and hope she had brought to the lives of those around her flashed before Noah's eyes like lightning, a cruel reminder of what was at stake. And then, in a moment suspended between agony and revelation, the silence broke, not gently, not mercifully, but in a jagged, raw confession, words tumbling out of Noah's lips in a torrent of regret, fear, and the grim acknowledgement of a secret too heavy to bear, that something had happened to Allie, something that none of them could have foreseen, that threatened to rip apart the fragile bonds holding families, friendships, and alliances together. The room seemed to shrink around them, the walls closing in as Jack's fury clashed with a shattering grief that twisted his face into something unrecognizable, a man on the edge of losing control, yet unwilling to let go, unwilling to accept that the world could be so cruel, so unrelentingly tragic. And yet, even as Noah's confession spilled forth, the horror of possibility gnawed at Jack's mind. Was Allie gone? Or was there a shred of hope left, a thread he could cling to in the darkness that seemed to be consuming every corner of their lives? The air was electric with unspoken fears, with the weight of 1,000 unasked questions pressing down like a tidal wave, and Jack's mind raced, plotting, calculating, desperate to protect, desperate to uncover, desperate to face whatever nightmare waited at the end of this truth. And in that moment, Genoa City itself seemed to hold its breath, suspended between despair and revelation, because in a world where every secret could ignite a firestorm, where every betrayal cut deeper than the last, the question of Allie's fate was more than a question. It was the axis around which the lives of those Jack loved, feared, and sometimes loathed spun violently, unpredictably, dangerously, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Noah's chest heaved violently, the pressure of Jack's hands on his shoulders almost unbearable, and every instinct screamed at him to run, to escape, to vanish from the suffocating intensity radiating from Jack, yet he remained frozen, a prisoner of both fear and guilt, knowing that the truth he carried was a seed of destruction ready to explode and leave no one untouched. Jack's eyes were unrelenting, blazing with a mixture of anger, desperation, and a kind of protective rage that only a man who had loved and lost could summon, and Noah could see, reflected in that fiery gaze, the fear that maybe he had failed, that maybe his hesitation had already doomed Allie, that maybe the light in her eyes, the warmth of her laughter, was forever extinguished because of a single moment, a single choice, a single misstep. Every second stretched into an eternity, the silence between words thick and suffocating, as if the very air around them knew the weight of the secret and refused to move until it was revealed. Noah's hands shook uncontrollably, his knees threatening to buckle under the gravity of what he had to say, and the memories came crashing back like a relentless tide. Allie running through the Abbott mansion, carefree and laughing, the way she had clung to hope even when everything else seemed hopeless, her gentle heart breaking the hardened walls of the people around her, including him. He remembered the nights she had cried in his arms, the whispered confessions, the dreams she had shared, and the promises he had made to keep her safe. And now, standing before Jack, he felt that protection slipping through his fingers like water, the reality of what had happened pressing down with a weight that made every breath a struggle, every heartbeat a drum of impending doom. Jack's grip on Noah tightened, though whether it was to punish, to demand, or simply to make sure the truth could not escape, Noah couldn't tell, and it didn't matter. He felt trapped, suffocating, and utterly exposed, as if every lie, every omission, every tiny deception had been laid bare in that single, unyielding gaze. Noah. Jack's voice cracked slightly, revealing just a hint of the emotion he tried to contain. I don't care what it takes, I need to know. Tell me now. Did something happen to Allie? The words struck Noah like a physical blow, reverberating through his body, shaking him to his core, because he knew that whatever he said next could either bring relief or ignite a firestorm that would consume everyone he cared about. He wanted to speak, to reassure Jack, to deny the possibility that Allie could be gone, but the truth was jagged, sharp, and impossible to frame in comforting terms. His throat burned, his tongue felt heavy, and his mind raced, recalling every single detail, every conversation, every misstep, every moment that could have prevented this crisis. And as he opened his mouth, finally, to speak, a tremor in his voice betrayed the storm of emotion raging inside him, a storm that threatened to drown them both. Yes, Jack, it's... Noah's voice faltered, his words catching in his throat, because no matter how carefully he tried to phrase it, the weight of reality pressed down on him with brutal insistence. Jack's face hardened further, the anger now mingling with an unspoken fear, a realization that the fragility of life, the unpredictability of fate, had struck again in the most merciless way. He leaned in closer, forcing Noah to meet his eyes, forcing him to confront not just the immediate consequences, but the ripple effect that Allie's fate could unleash across Genoa City. Noah! Jack's voice thundered, shaking the walls with its intensity, a sound that demanded honesty, demanded clarity, demanded absolution, and Noah felt it like a physical force, pressing him into submission, stripping away all pretense, all hope of evasion. Noah's mind flashed back to the moments leading up to this moment, every choice, every hidden conversation, every lie that had been told in the shadows, and he realized that Jack's wrath, terrifying as it was, paled in comparison to the judgment Allie herself would pass, the disappointment in her eyes, the heartbreak of knowing that someone she trusted had let her down. The weight of it pressed down on him like a mountain, and he felt his knees weaken further, as if the world itself was demanding confession. He swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill, fighting against the panic clawing at his chest, and finally, in a voice trembling with raw, unfiltered emotion, he spoke the words that had haunted his every waking moment. She's gone, Jack. I couldn't. I tried, I swear. I tried to. The words broke off, replaced by a choking sob, the anguish too much to continue, and Jack's face contorted in a mix of horror, grief, and rage, a storm of emotions that seemed almost too large to contain in a single human form. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, the air itself frozen, the universe holding its breath, because the revelation was not just a statement, it was an explosion, a seismic event that threatened to topple relationships, destroy alliances, and shatter hearts in ways that might never heal. Jack's hands, still gripping Noah, trembled ever so slightly, betraying the storm within him, a storm that had been forged over decades of loss, betrayal, and the unrelenting responsibility of protecting the people he loved, and now it had been ignited into a blaze by the confirmation of a nightmare he had tried so hard to deny. Noah could see the conflict raging in Jack's eyes, the split between fury and sorrow, vengeance and despair, and he knew that the moment they were in was a crucible, a test of character, a point of no return. Every heartbeat was amplified, every breath a struggle against the tidal wave of emotion, and as Jack's grip tightened further, not in anger, but in a desperate need to understand, to control, to anchor himself in some fragment of reality, Noah felt the full weight of guilt pressing down, threatening to crush him entirely. He had hoped, prayed, imagined that there might be a way to soften the blow, to frame it, to find a thread of hope, but there was none. Allie's fate was a stark, unflinching reality, and the burden of that truth now lay squarely in his hands, exposed and raw. Jack stepped back slightly, the tension in his shoulders a visible quake, and he breathed heavily, trying to reconcile the world he thought he knew with the one that had just shattered in an instant. Gone, he repeated, voice low, deadly, and incredulous, as if merely saying the word aloud might force the universe to correct itself. Allie, she's really gone? And in that moment, the room seemed impossibly large and oppressively small all at once, echoing with the ghosts of what had been, the potential of what might have been, and the cruel certainty of what was. Noah nodded, tears streaming freely now, his own grief colliding with the terror in Jack's eyes, and he felt the enormity of responsibility, the unbearable burden of having to live with the knowledge that no matter how much he wanted to rewrite the past, no amount of wishful thinking could bring her back. Jack fell silent for a heartbeat, then another, the storm of rage inside him transforming into a quieter, more insidious grief, the kind that ate at the soul and refused to be assuaged. He looked at Noah, really looked, seeing not just the boy who carried the secret, but the human cost, the fragility, the unbearable weight of living with consequences that could never be undone. And then, almost imperceptibly, his shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him as the enormity of the loss settled into his bones, a slow, creeping realization that no amount of control, no cunning plan, no network of influence could shield him, or anyone else, from the cruel randomness of fate. Even as the room remained heavy with grief, with a kind of silence that pressed into the ears and made every thought louder, Jack's mind began to race again, a survival mechanism, a strategy for coping with the chaos, seeking a way to honor Allie, to protect those still living, to exact some measure of justice, some flicker of retribution, in a world that seemed determined to punish them for every moment of weakness, every lapse of judgment. Noah watched him, terrified, heartbreaking for the man before him, knowing that Jack's grief, if left unchecked, could become something far darker, something capable of consuming them both. Yet, amid the despair, a tiny spark remained, an ember of hope, of determination, of the relentless will to face the impossible and somehow survive, even in the shadow of unimaginable loss. The city outside went on, oblivious, unaware that inside a single room, the fabric of lives had been torn asunder, that secrets had been revealed, that innocence had been lost, and that two men now stood at the edge of a precipice, forced to confront not just what had happened, but what it meant for everything to come. And as the minutes stretched, dragging the weight of grief and revelation with them, one thing became brutally, painfully clear. Nothing in Genoa City, nothing in their lives, would ever be the same again, because Allie's fate had irrevocably altered the course of hearts, minds, and destinies, leaving only the stark, unyielding truth in its wake. Even as the silence stretched on, suffocating and relentless, Jack's gaze never wavered, burning into Noah as if sheer force of will could pull Allie back from whatever fate had claimed her, and Noah felt every second of that gaze like a hammer against his chest. His mind raced uncontrollably, spinning through every moment he had spent with Allie, trying to piece together where things had gone wrong, to figure out if there had been some choice, some action, some single, tiny detail he could have changed that might have kept her safe. He saw her face in flashes, smiling, laughing, vulnerable, trusting, and it twisted his stomach into knots, a painful reminder that he had failed someone whose light had always been so bright it seemed untouchable, unbreakable. Jack, for his part, was a maelstrom of emotion, fury, grief, and a desperate, almost parental need to make sense of a world that had suddenly gone horribly, incomprehensibly wrong. His fingers still gripped Noah's shoulders, though the touch had shifted from raw anger to a trembling desperation, as if anchoring himself to someone else's presence could stave off the chaos threatening to swallow him whole. Every breath in the room felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths, every heartbeat like a drumbeat marking the end of innocence, and Noah felt himself collapsing inward, a collapse made more agonizing because he couldn't even cry properly without Jack's towering presence reminding him of what was at stake. I don't even know how it happened, Noah choked out finally, his voice ragged, breaking under the sheer magnitude of confession. I swear I tried to protect her. I thought I could, he faltered, because even the words themselves felt inadequate, hollow against the reality he was trying to describe. Jack's eyes narrowed, fury and sorrow twisting together, and for a heartbeat Noah wondered if Jack might strike him, might shatter him completely in a physical act as brutal as the emotional devastation he was experiencing. But Jack didn't strike. Instead, he leaned closer, eyes piercing into Noah's soul, seeking answers, seeking absolution, seeking some small shred of clarity in a world that had gone insane. Do you understand what you're telling me? Jack's voice was low, dangerous, carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats and unexpressed grief. Do you realize the consequences of what you've done, or what you couldn't do? Do you even understand the pain he faltered himself, voice catching as the enormity of loss struck him anew, the pain this is causing everyone who loved her. Noah could only shake his head, tears streaming freely now, blurring his vision, the shame and sorrow making him feel smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. He wanted to explain, to rationalize, to make it make sense, but nothing could. There was no explanation, no excuse, no narrative that could make the truth palatable, and he felt Jack's presence bearing down like a physical weight, crushing him with the expectation that he somehow bear the brunt of Allie's absence. He thought of the life she had yet to live, the moments she would never experience, the laughter that would no longer echo through the Abbott mansion, and the realization hit him like a blow to the chest. Allie was truly gone, and nothing he could do, nothing anyone could do, could undo that. Jack, seeing the hopelessness in Noah's eyes, felt his own despair spiral, a twisting knot of fury, grief, and helplessness that had no outlet, no end, and no mercy. Jack's voice dropped to a whisper, thick with emotion, almost unrecognizable in its vulnerability. Gone, she's really gone? The words lingered in the air, a death sentence whispered in the dimly lit room, and Noah nodded, his sobs now uncontrollable, shaking the floor beneath him in sync with his shattered heart. Jack's hands released Noah, not out of mercy, but because he suddenly felt powerless to hold onto anything, powerless against the enormity of the loss, against the cruelty of fate, against the invisible hand that had taken Allie from them. For a moment, they both simply stood there, two men caught in the debris of heartbreak, the silence stretching, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. And then Jack's mind, unable to remain still, began to race again, plotting, calculating, desperate to find any semblance of control in a world that had just demonstrated that control was an illusion, and he realized that revenge, justice, and understanding were all intertwined, impossible to separate from the ache that gnawed at his chest. Noah's gaze dropped to the floor, feeling utterly small beneath Jack's storm, knowing that this confrontation was only the beginning of the emotional and moral consequences they would both face. He thought of the Abbott family, of the pain they would feel when they discovered what had happened, of the questions that would come, of the whispers in Genoa City's halls that would inevitably swirl, and he felt the crushing inevitability of judgment pressing down on him from every angle. Jack, meanwhile, paced the room, hands clenching and unclenching, muttering under his breath, unable to silence the relentless tide of grief that threatened to swallow him. Every memory of Allie, her laugh, her warmth, her stubborn streak, the way she always managed to see the good in people even when everything else was dark, flashed before him, each one a dagger to the heart, each one a reminder of how mercilessly fate had intervened. The room seemed to shrink, then expand, then shrink again, as if the walls themselves were alive, reacting to the tension and grief that radiated from Jack and Noah. Every sound, the ticking of a clock, the faint hum of the air conditioning, even their own labored breathing, was amplified, magnified.